Oh, look.
Good morning and good evening, good day to you, Melrosians. Because we're around. Listen. The sun never sets on Melrose. People around the world, all over the internet, are watching. Good evening, wherever you are, Melrosians around the world. I'm Tom Catalini.
I'm Jen LeClaire.
I think I'm Sam.
I'm Tom Shampoo.
And this, of course, is Let's Talk Melrose, a show where Melrosians talk to Melrosians about Melrose. We are worldwide and proud of it. And here we are tonight. And I think I'm a little frazzled, to be honest with you. It's been a big week. A lot of things are going on in the world. But in the world of LTMM, we had Lauren Grimmick on, Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and we found out that there were no prerequisites, no pre-qualifications to get in. So we decided to join. And we are the newest members of the Chamber of Commerce.
So Groucho Marx has a famous saying, a famous line that he says, "I want to belong to any club that wants to have me as a member." So
I have totally lost respect for the chamber. So my first motion is to remove us from this committee.
Right. I have a feeling somebody is busy rewriting the bylaws as we speak.
Right. No, I feel like the esteemed chamber is highly respected, and then suddenly we arrived and like hold up, wait a minute.
Right, wait a minute.
It's like a Three Stooges episode.
Exactly.
But we are ready to be at the table with the voice of unreason. So
that's right. So look out. I will say also, so we've already started getting their newsletter now. I think I forwarded it to you guys. It comes to me and I'll forward it on to the rest of the team. We are in good company. That newsletter is full of outstanding Melrose businesses doing great things. So it's great fodder for us to dig through and steal information and report it here on the show. Just a couple quick examples of things that we found in the newsletter already. Fitzgerald Physical Therapy Associates raised $1,500 for the Melrose Firefighters EMS Scholarship Fund. Fantastic. So that helps our Melrose students attend BU's EMS program. Anna and our awesome downtown Main Street businesses, Anna Donahue Interiors, gorgeous new shop down there, recently received Boston Magazine's Best in Transitional Design, and it's on the cover of Boston Magazine's Home Edition issue. So that's super cool.
Isn't that Dana Anahue?
Dana Bonahue?
Dana Bonahue?
Right. I hope they spelled it right on the magazine.
That's the new interior design shop that Sam and I are opening in the Bank of America ATM space.
Oh, that's right.
And there's a lot of businesses celebrating a number of years in business here in Melrose. LCM Landscaping is very, very active and generous in the community, 35 years in business. Eric's Barbershop, 25 years in business. And also SDM Foundation. They've been here, but they are in an awesome new location, right near the Waggery, like on that first block, kind of near Grove on Main Street. They just had an opening ribbon cutting. They're very helpful, tech savvy, super, super great organization. So we are in good company. We're,
It's exciting. And the big thing is, when people are trying to book me for appointments later this week, I go, no, I have a meeting at the chamber.
Right. I had to put my title down on something, and I put co-host, co-founder, co-producer.
Yeah. I think next up, we need to look into the Rotary Club. I think that's the next organization we need to infiltrate.
The sky is the limit. But let's get on to the news.
I like it. So I'm going to blow through this, but somebody put down school budget boxing round 1. I think it's more of a kumbaya shifting as everybody sings, because we are all here on the same team.
A tango.
School budget did ask for a smidge of an increase, and there was some back and forth between some school committee members, one of them being our mayor. But the one thing I did want to, so we're going to cover this in more detail as the conversation goes on.
Sam, we did get a quick soundbite from the meeting.
I like Sam's point that this should be collaborative and we're all on the same team.
Yes,
and you can rumble collaboratively.
That's true.
Yes, that's how we do it.
Constructive rumbling. Go ahead.
But there was one thing I wanted to say, if Mike Karaji, if you are watching, or any other folks who do publish anything about the school committee and this budget process, the city of Melrose has one budget. There is not a city budget and a school budget. Please, we are one budget. The school happens to be just one line item that happens to be the biggest one. But I think we have the divide between school and versus city is how a lot of this friction starts. So come on, one budget.
Open tall. One budget, open tall.
Rise up. Let's rise up.
That's what they call a false dichotomy.
Yes, precisely.
Look at that.
I'll put the link into what that means into our chat.
All right, Tom, keep it moving here. We got a big guest. We have an exciting
I know
guest.
we have people want to hear from. I know people want to hear from not us. Let's go.
No kidding. So there's a quick note here from the newsletter that School Committee Jen McAndrew put out, and it looks like Melrose High School students have organized a Melrose Community Book Project, and they're offering virtual story times for elementary school kids. I believe it's going to be K through 2 and then 3 through 5 for the grades. So parents can sign their kids up, grade school kids, to be a part of this online Zoom story reading book time after school hours. So again, you can look up for that information, and it sounds like a nice project.
It does. Sounds like a nice partnership. I think the younger kids like to hear from high school students. I think they think that the kids that age are like kind of rock stars, right? So
yeah, sure.
That'll be fun. Cool.
What do they call that thing? Now my kids are much older now, but what do they call that thing they had the Lincoln School where like a 5th grader would partner with a kindergarten?
Book buddies.
Book buddies.
My kids did that. Kids did that.
I'll tell you, that was so much fun for my kids when they were in kindergarten, and it was just as much fun as when they were 5th graders. That's just a great.
It was cool. Yep. Agreed. All right. Go ahead, Sam. We're moving it along.
Yes, I was still posting about false dichotomies. Okay. So also, Melrose is still having a conversation. It's still Black History Month. And the Melrose Ed Foundation is taking that into March. They're having a Interrupting Racism 3-part session. You don't have to make all 3 parts, but there are 3 parts to it. And so I'm going to put that in our chat. I think it's going to be a phenomenal program where we can learn a lot more about how to do this work and how to have these conversations. And I also attended the Melrose Democratic City Committee Anti-Racism Activism in Melrose panel last Wednesday. It was really phenomenal, full of groups that are doing similar work, that have a nice Venn diagram that all coalesces together. And to lend more insight into that is our guest tonight, Jim Bennett, who moderated and facilitated that panel. So welcome, Jim. Oh yeah.
Come on. Yeah, come on in, Jim. While he's coming on with his walk-up music, can I just ask quickly, was that recorded, Sam? Can people see that? Because I missed it. No.
It was unfortunately not recorded.
Okay.
But there will be sign up. The committee will be sharing information about all the groups that were there.
Great.
And they're all inclusive per nature of their being. And so they welcome more people to the table.
Awesome. And hello, Jim Bennett. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. It's been really dizzying so far.
Welcome to our world.
You're welcome.
Nonstop, boy. Nonstop.
Jim Bennett is a commissioner on the Melrose Historical Commission. And we're going to let you jump right in and tell people a little bit about what is the Melrose Historical Commission. What do you guys do?
Sure, and I should clarify that I'm actually shuffling off of the commission, like as of last week. So I served on it for something like 7 or 8 years. I was chair of the commission for a while. But one of our problems on the historical commission is a distinct lack of diversity. And I realized when I looked around, well, here I am a white guy. If I want to have someone who's not a white guy on the commission, then I've got to go. Yeah. So I'm giving it to a white woman, Kate Monet, who is great, and she's been approved by City Council, and that's wonderful. But as to what we do, we are the organization in the city, an organ of city government. Our job is to help to preserve, to protect, to promote all of the historical resources in the city of Melrose. And that primarily means structures, as in buildings. It can also mean landscapes. It can also mean archaeological resources under the ground.
Wow. What about our storytelling too? What about like historical figures in Melrose and things like that?
Right. Well, those figures, that storytelling is absolutely a part of all of those resources, right? It's actually the people that make a difference, because if it was just an empty house that no one ever lived in, who would really care? It would be a very pretty building, but would have no human interest. So telling those human stories are really what brings it alive and makes it meaningful.
Yeah, completely.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sam.
No, I was gonna say, so obviously we've been very impressed with the coverage that the Historical Commission has done on the Black History series. And we're going to put some of the articles up now about the work that you've done. But do you have anything kind of like the most interesting story that you learned during your research from this series that you can talk us through?
Sure. Well, it's not an individual story. It's a big macro story in a way. You know, I grew up in the city of Melrose, and the story I was told as a kid was basically that, oh, Melrose is a white community. It's always been a white community. And now look, there are some Black people who are moving in, and some people, of other races who are moving in. And through the research, what I was able to determine is that that has not been the case, right? During the period of enslavement in the 18th century, Melrose was maybe up to 5% Black, which is Blacker than it is right now. So its most Black period was over 200 years ago, which is really something to think about, right? The other thing I learned is that after the Civil War, the city got to be a little bit under 1% Black. There was actually a community with families moving into homes in various neighborhoods in the city. There's some evidence that there were small businesses run by Black folks. And that was really taken away from them. They were forced out in a lot of ways, you could say, starting in about the 1920s, so that by the time you get to the year 1950, we were down to, according to the census in that year, 12 Black people in the city. So this appearance that Melrose has always been white is in fact completely wrong. And there are good reasons why we've gone through these cycles.
So there's so much. I mean, I was fascinated reading the articles in the paper, and there's two that I think have been published, correct? And it's an ongoing series of sort of Black history in Melrose. Yeah. It's a fascinating topic, and one of the things that we talked about before the show tonight was that we wanted to understand that, we know that there's a rich history in Melrose. We all value that history. We love the fact that the history is being made available to people. So thank you for that work, Jim. It's really impressive. I was reading through this and just, really blown away by the history that I didn't know anything about, both geographic, I should say, and also individual. You mentioned some of the people, some of the houses, some of the neighborhoods in the city that had the history since the Civil War, and it was all fascinating. But one of the things that I wanted to just sort of make sure that we acknowledge is that, we're wanting to have a conversation around Black history in Melrose, but we're 5 white people on a TV show. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood that there is a great opportunity for a conversation to happen at every level with every resident. People should know the history, should understand it, should value and appreciate that history, because every person that's been in Melrose helped in some way to make Melrose what it is today.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Tom. And one thing that I've been very struck by, right, is that every single story I've told in every period, you cannot tell the story of Black folks in Melrose without reference to white people. And unfortunately, in most of these stories, that encounter between white and Black does not end well for the Black people involved with that. So what that should tell people, though, is that if you are white and you're in Melrose, this is actually white history as well. It actually is an important part of your story, and that story might not have been told to you for particular reasons that you might have to figure out for yourself. So one commenter on one of our Facebook posts did say something like, "Wow, this really completes us." And I really think that got to it, that you didn't get the whole story, and now you're getting a part that was not told to you.
Well, it's a great Jerry Maguire reference to one of my favorite movies that I watch twice a year. But what I have, that comment. But what I've appreciated about, so a lot of it's new to me as well. Not familiar with the history in Melrose, and it is one history. It's not white history, black history. It's one history. Yeah. And this, I've been following your blog posts. So you guys are all over social media in different areas, but. It's a little bit of an unvarnished view of it, and you do have to see not only the population statistics you're talking about, but the fact that minstrel shows were popular in the city for 50 years, according to one of your articles. Like that's a generation or two generations of time. And then the other one that sort of stuck with me was the woman who was about to give birth locally at the hospital that's now it's part of Stoneham and was turned away, and then fortunately was able to go to Boston, but like not until the next day. So it has really been fascinating to see kind of what feels like a little bit more of a complete picture and accurate representation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say with, you mentioned that we've been blanketing social media. I have to thank my partner in this, Ward Hamilton, who's the chairperson of the Historical Commission, who's the one who's actually been posting these things. So thank you, Ward, if you happen to be watching. But the minstrel shows, for example, it's amazing. You go back into the microfilm of the Melrose Free Press in the 1900s, the 1910s. That's how I first discovered this. I wasn't looking for minstrel shows. You're just cruising along, and then suddenly you see these images and say, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then you come to realize it's every year. It's happening constantly. And at some point, folks decided this is not a good thing. We should stop doing it. But at that point, they just said, okay, we're going to forget about this. But it was absolutely central to Melrose. And I think as much as we like to say there's no white history, there's no black history, right? There is. And it's because people imagine themselves as white. That was really important to them. And so that's why we do have to talk about, in a sense, both of those streams going on, I think.
I also think you spoke earlier about the history that we're presented with, and it's not it's not the complete picture. Some of the examples that you gave, the Lind House and the Sprague House. We come across these things, and we all know them as the Upham House, the Sprague House, the Beebe Estate, right? And we're told a bit of the story, right? We're told about the revolutionaries gathering under the elm tree. We're told a bit of the story, but your work really showed the complete story. But we're told that this building or this person who lived here is important, and we sort of take that at face value. There's okay, this is part of our history. And I think we all have a responsibility to dig in more and ask questions and know the complete picture. The Spragues, the Linds, these families, there's always more to the story. And your work has really done a great job expounding on those stories and giving everybody the complete picture. Yeah, we need to do a better job at not just saying the Sprague House. We need to do a better job of acknowledging the whole story on the plaque or on the whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jen. And I do have to say, if we're not told those stories, it's been deliberate, right? Because there was a time in the 19th century, right? Imagine you're in the late 19th century in Melrose. A lot of people who fought in the Civil War. Maybe you did fight in the Civil War. You know what slavery is. And so if you go back to the 19th century, Melrosians writing about Melrose talk about slavery. Oh yeah, of course it was here. But in the 20th century, there was this movement, which almost is a form of ancestor worship, where these folks were just put up onto a pedestal, and deliberately people did not want to talk about this because it might tarnish their reputations. And that's really a shame, because I don't think it does. And that example of the stone that is in Gooch Park that tells you about the people who went off to fight Lexington and Concord, that's absolutely true. It took a lot of bravery to do that. Sure. But the reason why they were so concerned about losing their liberty and their freedom is because at home they had someone who had no liberty and freedom. And it actually helps you to understand their mindset better once you get that full picture.
Yeah, it's a great point.
just very quickly, I was hoping maybe we could just back up for 5 seconds for folks who maybe don't know the full history. Melrose was incorporated as a town in 1850. Is that right?
Yes.
And then a city in 1900. It became the city of Melrose. But like, what was happening in that 50-year period? Like, obviously there's a lot of Victorian houses in the city, so it was a Victorian era city. So just give us a snapshot very quickly of like the growth of Melrose between pre-Civil War and maybe 50, 60, 70 years after.
Yeah, I sometimes like to think, all of Melrose history can be divided into 3 sections, right? The longest section by far, the Native Americans. The second section starts when Europeans arrive with their enslaved people in the 17th century. And the third section, we're living in it right now. It's since 1845, since that railroad came through. Because once that happens, this becomes a suburb, right? And the growth rate is extraordinary. So in 1850, the population of Melrose is 1,260 people. By 1900, it's 12,800 people. So you've had 1,000% growth in that time. And it's all new people, and a lot of them work in Boston, and they're bringing new ideas, new houses, of course, new industries they're working in, new small businesses. It's a really exciting time.
So I was under the impression, that the railroad back then was primarily for the mills, but this is bringing people. This is transporting people back and forth to Boston.
Melrose, right from the beginning, was really a residential development. Yeah. So there are some small factory concerns. There's small manufacturing going on. But aside from the rubber factory that's going to be in the south end, of course, down in Ward 5, close to Oak Grove, there's never any really big industry here. So from the beginning, it's people who are commuting to Boston. And the great thing is you can see the variety of different houses in Melrose, and the houses are built at different price points. So a lot of people can afford to do this. Okay. Including Black folks.
Yeah.
So I was going to just not even pivot, but underscore everything you just mentioned with you. There was an interactive map of people of color in Melrose that you've put together as well. So I just posted that to Facebook, and that was extremely fascinating. But I want to pivot a little bit to the work that you are involved in today. So you obviously spend a lot of time thinking about the past and how we can kind of move forward. But can you talk through a little bit more about the work that you've seen in Melrose? Obviously, we just had a panel last week covering some of the anti-racist work happening, but can you shed a little bit more light on that?
Just in general in the city, what's been going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been, I think, for anti-racist work, a really exciting time in Melrose history. Really, the past 5 years or so have been really phenomenal. So back in 2015, I think it was, we had a pastor at the First United Methodist Church, Stacey Lanier. Her husband came in, Stewart, who was a teacher with the organization White People Challenging Racism. And he brought it here. He taught others in this community, like Jane Allen and Beth Hampson and Corey Allen, how to teach this course, and now there are, well over 100 people who have graduated from that, and they're doing all kinds of projects in Melrose. Beyond that, we've had a number of groups very active over the years. So Friends of Melrose Metco, big year this year, thanks to Zoom. They're able to communicate much better with parents from Boston. Of course, the big news just a little while ago is Indigenous Peoples Day. Melrose has had the great success of getting Indigenous Peoples Day. And since the George Floyd energy that came out of that, we've had 2 new groups that have formed: the Racial Justice Community Coalition, which is very much this coalition-based inclusivity DEI group, and then Fighting for Black Lives in Our Neighborhood, which is particularly interested in police reforms in this city. So there's just been really a groundswell, and as far as this Black History Project went, it was really the perfect time to put it out because people are really looking for answers as they're doing this work.
Well, I think it's interesting to figure out how to keep that a constant part of the conversation, because these things that are event driven, it can sort of ebb and flow. And this series has been good. I think it's like every day on this blog I'm following. There's a post going in. It takes a lot of time to do that. But what's been nice is it's kind of sustaining that, and everything you just talked about. A lot of this is new information to me. It's interesting to hear how that energy could sort of get out there, and maybe we're getting ideas for future guests on the show, because we are one of those outlets. But things that can keep the conversation going. I don't know if the groups are having those discussions, or if they're thinking about what I would consider to be the success of the social media campaign of what you're doing for Black History Month, if others are doing that kind of awareness and keeping the discussion going. You talked earlier about the value of that discussion, and I think that's so important to figure out how to keep it going.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with that. I was very happy to hear from Jen that there might be interest from the Cultural Council in doing something with this. Certainly, I think Chris Rodolico up at Follow Your Art has been fantastic in trying to bring artists of color into this community. There might be an opportunity to do some collaboration there in terms of, memorializing this stuff. So I think there are a lot of people in the city who are interested in this, who understand that, Black History Month does not come once a year, or MLK Day is not just one day of service, that this is something that has to happen continuously. And I think to bring it back around to the history, a sad theme in Melrose history in a way is that we've always had people who you might consider to be the woke people, right? Who are working on these sorts of things, who we can look back and say, oh, look, that guy was an abolitionist in 1845, or look at this group of women who were fighting for suffrage in 1900. But there are ebbs and flows, and that energy goes to waste, and then suddenly you're in a much more conservative period again, and we don't want to go back into that, I think. Well, there's a lot of good work to be done.
That's interesting. So is there a full, ebb, or do you feel like we make a little bit more progress each time we push the envelope forward?
That's a great question, Sam, and I think the answer is sometimes no. And the example I would give is, if you look at Melrose in that post-Civil War period, right, you had certain very big issues. There was the abolitionist issue and pushing to make sure that Reconstruction, right, would continue. There was suffrage, was another huge issue that unified women all around town. There was the Prohibition movement, which we tend not to think of as a progressive movement, but it really was at the time, because it intersected with things like, how can we stop domestic violence in the home, right, by stopping men from drinking and so on. And once they kind of checked off, what their particular goal, oh, okay, slavery's over in the South, okay, women have the right to vote, okay, we've got booze off the streets of Melrose, then everybody just stops for a while. And in Melrose, what that meant was, in terms of race, is that suddenly segregation comes back to the fore. And now, we really don't need Black people in Melrose. Let's tell them that their lease is expired and they can go look elsewhere. And we're not going to show homes to these folks because, if you let one Black family into the neighborhood, it might decrease the value of those homes. And everyone knows this is happening in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and nobody really wants to do anything about it.
So you're a historian outside of Melrose, which we don't usually talk about on this show.
Nothing exists outside of Melrose.
I don't like where this discussion is going, Sam.
If you were to, we always talk about wishes and waving a magic wand to change things, but if you were to provide some guidance or some advice on how to not ebb fully backwards on this exact issue, what would you like to see Melrose do?
Yeah, I think, and this is actually important, that I'm talking to a group of white people here. That and I know our audience is not all white, but I'm talking to you right now, and you raise the concern, okay, it's just white people here. It is the job of white people when it comes to race-related issues to always remember that they are white people, that there are people of color who are not present, and that it is our job to fix this problem amongst ourselves. So it is not, oh, let's have a person of color come in and tell us how to solve the problem and let them solve the problem. It's our job. And the way you do that is to always ask yourself in every conversation, how is this a racial moment, right? How is this being affected? I do that with history all the time because you're given standard stories of the past, and I consciously ask, is race going on here? Is there somebody, a person of color, who was forgotten? And I can find that person if I look for them, because that tends to be what white people do. When they write the history, they talk about the white people. It tends to be the white man. The white woman's labor tends to get forgotten. And that's who we're left with. And then you get these history books and you discover, oh, Benjamin Lind, that was the one person who mattered. Ralph Sprague, that's it. When, no, but you've got to look. You've got to be intentional about it.
Well, we count on you to keep us honest.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. I've learned so much. I've learned so much this month, and it feels like the series, like for Tom's point, keeping the conversation going. Like I don't want it to end. Your social media posts and your blog posts and your articles in the weekly, in the Melrose Weekly, just keep them coming because we're all learning so much, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, the Black History posts will come to an end at the end of Black History Month, but then we'll circle back to other things. And again, when those posts come out, Black History Month doesn't end. Right. You ask the question as you're dealing with other themes and topics, how is race relevant here?
Right. And we often, there's been a lot of conversation, obviously, with the new city task force coming up for diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. Also want to mention, back to our topic on schools, every PTO has been looking for a DEI representative on their PTO board, which has been fascinating. So it's like all these sprouts are coming at the same time. And also in the school budget, they have requested a DEI director to be present at as a school staff member, a public school staff member. So I think, as Jim, as you mentioned, like there's a lot of activity happening. I think it's exponential at this point, and to harness all of that and bring everybody together to actually make some sizable, seismic change and movement that we cannot ebb from.
There you go.
Well said, Sam. And before we wrap, since Sam took us off topic, as a historian, I want to ask one broader question of the historian. So as a historian, we've talked about things back to the 1850s to present day. You mentioned prohibition. And so with that perspective, also in there is the Spanish flu of 1918. And we're hopefully seeing the end of the pandemic around the corner here. Jim, is it just roaring 20s off the hook for the next decade, or so give us a prediction for the future. How good is it going to be?
Yeah, I'm going to really disappoint you because I'm not one of those historians who makes predictions, because every historical moment is a unique moment. And so I will tell you, here's my word of advice. Whenever you open up a newspaper op-ed and you have some expert, some person maybe with a very advanced degree and supposedly very smart, who is telling you, here's what's going to happen for the next 40 years, come back in 40 years. Get out that article again.
I think we can create our own future. That's the message here.
We can, Jen. And I am going to be so bold as I am going to make a prediction that Jim Bennett is going to come back on this show and talk to us again one day in the future. That's my prediction, because we need to have more time with you. Thanks so much. It's been so
it's been fantastic.
Thank you. I would enjoy coming back.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right,
I think we forgot to tell him about this part coming up. I think.
Yeah. We didn't warn you.
So you heard the catchy theme song at the beginning, Jim. At the end, we get to dance it off live together.
Okay.
So that's what we're about to do now. 27 seconds of pure delight. Here we go. And we say to the people, we'll see you around town.
Hello.
Oh my God, Jim, amazing, emphatic.
He's definitely coming back.
Jim is going to be